Magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters, as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we cover all the home teams for you. New Orleans Saints, New Orleans Pelicans. We'll talk about the LSU Tigers, Tulane Green Wave, and we got a great panel to break it down for you tonight. Renee Nadeau and Kenny Trahan of CrestCitySports.com and so much more. And those guys will tell you a little bit more about what they do, but you got to have CrestCitySports.com on one of your favorites. They're giving you great local sports. And gentlemen, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being with us.
Nice to be here.
Kenny, we'll start with you because you got your hands in a lot of things. Tell the folks about it.
Yeah, well, CrescentCitySports.com is our first love, and it's been a great journey for us. We're 10 years with previous iterations of the site, but relaunching with this particular ID last August has opened up some new horizons for us. We think the name has gone over extremely well. Like the logo, too, for that matter. And, of course, what really makes it is the content and the contributors. Genuine journalists, which isn't necessarily the case in every aspect of this business now. There are some really good people doing things in other places, but we're very, very confident in what we have with the people we have, including this comrade of mine sitting next to me.
You guys both do a good job. Plus, you still got the radio show at 9.
Yeah, I still do a radio show on WGSO 4 times a week, and the Three Tailgaters show on Saturday morning from 10 to noon, and then Sports Talk during the week from 6 to 7 with myself and Jude Young. So still doing that, and then, of course, running the Saints Hall of Fame Museum, which I have now since 1988. Has it been that long? Wow. Scary.
Well, you've made it into quite a museum. It really is. If people have not seen it and gone through it, next time you go to a Saints game, you got to stop in and check it out. A lot of great memorabilia there as well.
It's great. We really enjoy it, and it's been a bunch of fun. And running the Greater New Orleans Sports Foundation Quarterback Club and writing for the Kenner Star. If you want me to go on, I could, but we take the whole hour.
We take the rest of the
night. Let's let
Renee let's throw it to Renee. Hey, Renee, welcome
He's
back.
the same way, by the way.
I go way back to the 70s when we played on a softball team together, on a radio softball team. So, no, it's good. And I've enjoyed my association with Kenny and the Crest City Sports. I love what I do with that. And college football analyst, TV analyst during the fall. Worked for CBS and WFAN radio for Saints games and some Pelicans and some other stuff, some bowl games. Mm-hmm. And I try to stay one step ahead and enjoy what I'm doing, and very, very blessed.
Right. It seems like the last 3 weeks of this show, we've been talking about people passing on, and we have another one tonight. Rusty Staub dies at 73 today, and both you guys know the history of Rusty Staub and the other great athletes here in the city. And I'll start with you, Kenny. Talk a little bit about Rusty Staub, what he meant to New Orleans, what he meant to baseball.
Well, he was special for 4 different organizations to accomplish what he accomplished with over 500 hits. Nobody else has ever done that. He also homered before he was 20 years old in the majors and homered after he was 40 years old. Who does that? And he signed his last contract, and I know the Staub family, so I know these things very well. But he signed his last contract with the Mets under the auspices of playing first base, and then within a matter of 2 months, they signed Dave Kingman. So what ended up happening is he lost all kinds of at-bats and became a glorified pinch hitter, because you don't have the DH in the National League. Even then, it came into vogue in the early 70s. So he lost all kinds of at-bats. Had he known that they were going to sign Kingman, he goes back to the American League, becomes a DH, he would have gotten 3,000 hits. I have no doubt about it. But 23 years in the majors, that's remarkable to accomplish what he's accomplished. And I think from a longevity perspective and productivity perspective, he's the best, in all likelihood. You can look at the others, and I think we were talking earlier, my Mount Rushmore of baseball would be Mel Ott, Mel Parnell, Will Clark, and Rusty Staub in no particular order for the obvious reasons. I don't think anybody comes close to any of those four. But Rusty was an amazing guy. I'm friends with his brother, Chuck. We're together quite a bit. Renee comes to a lot of the luncheons. We have our ministry luncheons on Wednesdays, and Chuck's there on a regular basis. And a couple of weeks ago, he said Rusty had taken a turn for the better. So it was disappointing to see this.
Yeah, Renee, your memories.
Oh, man. You know, and I know Kenny knows this, but a lot of people don't realize how good Rusty was. He had 27, you know, he didn't have the 3,000 hits, but he walked 1,255 times. He was on base 1,000 times more than Joe DiMaggio.
Wow.
Okay? He was on base more than Honus Wagner and Ichiro and guys like that. He didn't get the credit, but his on-base percentage, 362. He was a great hitter. He wasn't a really power guy, but he was a great hitter, DH hitter, and that's the reason why he lasted so long in the major leagues. And I don't think he really got credit for all the things he did and accomplished. And you know, Ron Swoboda, our good friend, can tell you, he was an integral part of when he played with the Mets. And Rusty, everywhere he went, he had success. His number's been retired, you know, in a number of times, and he's in so many halls of fame. And what he did away from baseball in New York is also outstanding. Tell you what kind of character he was.
Right? Well, he hit home runs, but had he played in different venues, he would have had a lot more home runs. But he played in Houston, in the Astrodome, most cavernous place there was at the time. He also played in New York. By that time, he'd shortened his swing and was a different hitter. And he played in Montreal, which they opened the roof, they closed the roof, and either way, it was a big ballpark, and it wasn't a home run park. The only place he ever played where he could hit him was Detroit. So he wasn't a guy that played in parks that were conducive to power numbers. And at the major league level, I really think you have to quantify the home run numbers based upon location. I think it does matter in that regard.
Right, and you mentioned the old Houston Colt 45s.
Colt 45s, Ken, I know you remember that.
Yeah.
Bob Espremani, Bob Lillis, John Bateman, Pete Runnels was on that team. Hal Woodishek was a closer. Turk Farrell was in a, you know, and this is, and Kenny knows, when you came up in that time, man, Houston was just a stone's throw.
Yeah.
And Rusty Staub was the connection to Major League Baseball for so many people in New Orleans. I mean, you know, a Jesuit guy and a guy who succeeded here and everything. And, you know, I remember a quick story. Rag Sherman told me this, that the Houston team was out scouting Rusty, and he was at Kirsch Rooney. And they brought a pitcher, but they didn't bring a catcher. And so Rags goes and gets his catcher, and Rusty's taking some cuts and stuff like this, and they throw him 10 pitches, he hits 10 over the fence. So they run back in Rags' car, and it's Rusty and a catcher, I can't think of his name. And they run back in the car, and Rags said, "Man, Rusty, you were really on today." He said, "You can be on when you know what pitch is coming." The catcher was telling him fastball, outside, curveball. So he was just, man, swinging away, and that Houston team left like, wow, man, this guy can hit. But anyway, he was a hitter, whether he knew the signals or not.
Yes.
Well, and of course it was a Nord product. You know, Bunny Friend Playground in Jesuit High School, as was mentioned. Furman Sims was a large part of his development. Kevin Trower was a large part of his development. And so there were people that helped shape him, but he had to have the ability and the want-to, and he certainly had both of those aspects.
Not just beloved in New Orleans, but also beloved in New York, too, huh?
Oh, very much so, and in Montreal.
Right.
I mean, he was dubbed Le Grand Orange, and in a French-speaking city, they loved him. So, yeah, everywhere he went, he was extremely popular. He was the face of the Astros initially. Renee rattled off some of those names. Aspro the Astro, Bob Espremante, a very memorable name. But the Astros weren't very good in those days, and they needed some identification, and they hang their hat on someone. Rusty Staub was that early year guy, and there's no doubt he carried that very well.
Yeah. Guys, let's shift gears to another passing, your first opportunity on this program to talk about the passing of Tom Benson.
Yeah, life well lived. I mean, when you're talking about Tom Benson, as I wrote at CrescentCitySports.com, it's all about the sum of the parts. If you want to pick apart a life, you can pick apart anybody's life, myself included, yourself, Renee. It's easy to do so. There are going to be some stumbling blocks. There are going to be some mistakes. There are going to be some things you aren't proud of during the course of your life. And that was certainly true of Tom Benson. I really think that Gail Benson changed him dramatically. And I make no qualms about it. I like her quite a bit. I think she's a really good person. And I think she really convinced him about it's time to give back, first and foremost. And secondly, for your legacy, here's your opportunity to be remembered forever, which I know he wanted to be. And when you see what he did over the final 12 to 13 years of his life, all of which were with her, you understand that. That's where most of the giving came. Not all of it, most of it. Tom was a giving man prior to that. He just didn't seem the part or look the part because he came across as being a little bit, you know, what's the right word? Foul at times. In the media industry, we call it a curmudgeon or something of that nature. But he really had a soft spot for many years. That was certainly true in his family, which is why he hung on so long despite the fact that there were issues, and then ultimately had to make a very difficult decision. And when he did, he was all in on Gail, and that's why she is well prepared to handle this. One more word on her. I was invited to the funeral and was there, and being there to see what transpired, it was done extremely well. She was genuinely in pain and hurting. And then she had to get on a plane and go to Orlando and act as an owner. And I think she's handled it extremely well. So good first impression. First impressions mean a lot.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Your thoughts, and then we'll talk a little bit about Gail Benson as well.
Tom Benson, and when people saw him on the field with an umbrella, he was a fan that owned the team. And he was excitement. He just, let it out and everything. But think of the landscape of the city if he wouldn't have bought the Saints, the Pelicans, the Super Bowls, and things that have come here, what it meant not only financially to the image of the city. Without those two franchises, I mean, it's scary to think what might have been.
Well, you'd have lost both teams. But the other part of that is simple. The people that want to criticize him about what happened after Katrina have every right to and should, and I did too.
And
it made every sense to do that because he didn't handle it right. He got it right in the end. That's all that matters. But other people have criticized him for all the hard-scrabble negotiations with the state. Well, what are you supposed to do? That's your job. These are your franchises. You're in business. You're trying to generate as much revenue as you can to make your businesses successful. I don't fault him for that at all. You want to say threats and leveraging and everything else, I wouldn't go that far, but I certainly think that when he was doing that, it was all part of the fact that he was trying to make his businesses successful. So no ill will there whatsoever.
Right. You mentioned Gail Benson, and, from standing in front of the Notre Dame Seminary for 9 hours and greeting every mourner that came by, to, again, what she did, and as Kenny said, that the quick turnaround, the burial, the second line, then the quick turnaround going to Orlando to represent the Saints as their sole owner. And I mentioned it this week on the radio show. I mean, just class. And then I had Fletcher Mackel on, and he mentioned the word elegant. And I think those are two words that really describe her. And, I think she put the city, I think she put the state and all the fans at ease when she said, look, these teams are not going anywhere. I'm going to keep the same hierarchy in place. She believes there was a blueprint for success, and she's going to follow that. Kenny, I'll take you first. Your thoughts on how she has handled this up to this point, because I think she's done a magnificent job of handling this since Tom Benson has died.
I do too. She was prepared for it first and foremost, and I thought that was the most important aspect of it. But she did not have to say what she said. I think everybody knew about the elephant in the room, and you're still getting all those thoughts and questions about, well, what happens if anything happens to her? And I get it, but she came out and made the statement that she made about the future of the franchises. Man, that just gave everybody a collective sigh of relief that had any concern, and anyone that might have been perhaps misled by reports locally about the franchises not being in solid state or in a state of flux or whatever the case may be. That was never truly the case at all. And the leagues, both of them, had already unanimously approved her as the successor and owner. So that was never the case where it was ever in any state of doubt. But the way she's handled herself so far, you'd give her an A+.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
And she has been every step of the way, and she's watched, knowing that one day she may be in this position. So she's prepared herself for that. And, keep in mind, it's a little different, too. But Mickey Loomis wasn't hired to be the general manager, and he's just worked himself up and did a great job where he is now. So, it's about preparation and knowing that your chance is going to come, your opportunity. And she has really prepared herself for this emotionally and otherwise. And, credit Tom, credit her, and credit the people around her for helping her along the way. Dennis Lausch and Mickey Loomis and Greg Benzel and those guys, and helping her get prepared for this.
And as the good thing, in a way, for her is that both teams are doing well right now. So there is no reason to rock the boat. Even though Dell Demps and Alvin Gentry have been roundly criticized, and again, up until this season, rightly so, both guys have turned it around this season. As much as I've been on Dell Demps over the last few years for again, the missteps that he's made some great moves this year to put this team in playoff contention. And Alvin Gentry, again, what coach changes everything in midstream when you lose one of your two best players and again, plays maybe even better in the second half of the season? Both those guys look like they'll be able to return. And the Saints are solid now going back to the playoffs.
both franchises are in good shape. You're right. So why would you change anything at this point? The Pelicans have to play themselves out. We'll see what happens, but I don't think that anyone at this point thinks there's going to be a change based upon what they've been able to do. Alvin Gentry has done a very good job, and I have not always been his biggest supporter. I've never called for him to be dismissed. I did think that Dell Demps probably should be dismissed based upon 6 years of having a chance. But to his credit, he's brought in guys that have helped this roster. Now they have to produce down the stretch. A couple of those guys have really slowed down quite a bit in Mirotic and Miller, and they need to get back on track because they're not a slam dunk, no pun intended, to make the playoffs just yet.
Well, I think it would take a monumental collapse over the last 7 games.
It would, but as long as the Clippers keep winning, there's an opportunity there to be caught. They still play the Clippers. So, to me, that's the team you're looking at.
Yeah.
Denver is still in it, but they're a bad road team. Their road record's bad. The Clippers are the ones to watch in my mind, and they still have a game with the Clippers.
Yeah.
The couple of things that the Pels are having trouble with are self-imposed. That they're horrible on offensive rebounds.
Yes.
They are ranked bottom
all season.
Yes, and
even with
turnovers, and that's things that the players have control. It's 1-2 with turnovers, and rebounding is. I know offensive rebounds is a little tough, but when you're ranked near the bottom, but they're shooting 48%. I mean, they're doing some things well, and they're since Boogie went down. They're getting more possessions. They're playing more upscale. Yeah. Credit Alvin Gentry.
Turnovers are down.
Yeah, and
way down.
And Gentry has changed those things, and he's used what he has and changed, tweaked some things and stuff. And credit him for making some changes with Boogie going down and Anthony Davis. But I mean, to win those 5 games out of 6. That took everybody all on board effort.
Right. That was huge, wasn't it, Kenny? When you look at that stretch and you look at today's NBA, we're not talking about NBA of years past where again, teams were playing back-to-back. They were playing so many games in a week. This breed of an NBA player is not used to that type of a stretch.
No, they won 5 of 6. They won 3 in a row. But here's the downside of that. I think you're still seeing the residual of it. Rondo's hurt, and that's really hurt him.
Yes.
If he plays against Portland, they probably win.
Agreed.
But to ask him to do what he did at his age with his physical skills was too much to handle. And then, of course, you're looking at other guys that aren't as productive.
Mirotic has the hip flexor.
Mirotic has a hip flexor, and he's been ineffective of late, and that's really hurt them. And other guys have not been as productive. The supporting cast has to be better. It just can't be Davis and Holiday. They need more. And they were getting that from everybody for a while. And we were getting the style of basketball that was promised to us.
Yes.
An open, up-tempo game. They were leading the league in scoring over a period of about 3 or 4 weeks there, which was special to watch. And people say, well, they're better without Cousins. Well, they're better in the short term, but not better in the long term. They're going to have to reindoctrinate not only Cousins to the lineup when they get him back, if they bring him back, but they're going to have to adjust their style as well.
I would agree with that. And I think maybe one of the missteps that Alvin Gentry made early was running the ball through Cousins instead of having Rondo handle the ball or a guard handling the ball. I think you saw that with all the turnovers that they had, and also, again, the way the game was slowed down. And I do fully expect Boogie Cousins to come back because the Pelicans are in a tough spot because of the salary cap. If they don't sign him, they have maybe about $10 million to sign another player, and that's not going to get it done when you lose a player of the stature of Boogie Cousins. So, he's got to come in with a different mindset and realize this up-tempo style will work, but he's got to acclimate himself to it and maybe give himself up a little bit without, again, letting the offense flow through him.
Well, I think the thing about Boogie is you're not going to change the way he approaches the game. He is who he is. But what you can do is this, and people talk about, well, he's too far from the basket, he's outside the arc and everything else. With 2 bigs, you got to have a high-low set anyway. You can't have 2 bigs on a low block. You got to have spacing. So having him out there isn't the issue. The issue is being out there and putting the ball on the floor where he turns it over, or being out there and flipping up 6 to 8 threes a game. Look, you shoot 2 or 3, I get it if you're wide open.
Sure.
But there's no need to be taking quick threes, especially contested from that distance.
And then also, again, getting down court on defense, which was an issue at times, and the arguing with the referees constantly, which is part of his MO.
And this team has really taken on a little bit of a new personality with this.
AD's personality, right?
And I'm going to tell you, this is more AD's team now than it was before. The team was, if you want to say, slipping away. He was not the with his under his grasp or maybe his leadership. And now with Boogie out of the picture now, it's more AD's team now than it ever was.
Yeah, I would agree. And Kenny, Rajon Rondo, thought to be a malcontent and a coach killer elsewhere. He has come in here and he has been a model citizen, a coach not on the floor but on the bench at practice. Giving out that knowledge that he's got from years. He's been. I don't know what this team would be without Rondo at this point.
Well, I think that Alvin Gentry handled him extremely well also, and that he limited his minutes early in the season when he finally got on the floor, so that he still could have something left in the tank late. Because at this stage of his career, he's no more than a 30-minute-a-game guy, and shouldn't be, because he'll get exposed on the defensive end. He just can't guard anymore. But he's so brilliant with seeing the floor and his ability to make other players better and get them shots. It clearly is lacking when he's not out there, with all due respect to Drew Holiday, who has flourished off the ball more so than I thought he would.
Yeah, me too.
He can still play on the ball, but not all the time if you want to be that team.
Yeah. Your thoughts?
And we're talking about starters, but also credit the coaching staff and the players for the Ian Clarks and the Czech Diallos and the Darius Millers, the guys who have been integral parts of the success here, that have come in roles, and Darius Miller and Czech Diallo. I mean, my gosh, how well have they improved this year? So you got to credit the staff with working with these guys and helping them improve, and for the guys buying in on their role and coming in X amount of minutes, and Darius Miller coming in, making some threes, and then hitting the bench again. So it's all worked out well, and it's the coaching staff.
Kenny, we've been pretty lucky, though, in New Orleans when you talk about coaches that can develop maybe marginal talent in the NBA. Monty Williams did it. Alvin Gentry's doing it. You're looking at guys now that are getting playing time. I mean, Czech Diallo's he's come light years from what he was when he first hit the court for them. And, of course, I liked Ian Clark in that signing. But once Boogie Cousins went out, these guys have had now an opportunity to flourish. They're getting more time. They're getting more touches. And they're making a difference for this team down the stretch.
Well, they were asked to absorb more responsibility. And by and large, they've handled it well. As I mentioned, Miller and Mirotic have really gone backwards here lately, and they need to step it back up if this team is going to get to the desired position, which is the 6th spot or higher, as we all know why. I think, and then people ask about matchups. As you look forward, who do you want to play? Who can you play? Who can you beat? I think I can answer that. I think they can beat Oklahoma City. I think they can beat San Antonio. I think they'd have a chance against Portland.
You think they have a chance, even with those guards?
Yeah, oh sure. They played Portland well this year. And again, if Rondo had played the other night, I think they'd have won that game. And they played Portland well. They beat them twice prior to that. They can't beat Houston. They can't beat Golden State. Right? Yes, they can't beat Houston, and they can't beat Golden State. But then you look otherwise, I'll tell you another team they don't want to play is Utah. Terrible matchup for them.
Horrible matchup.
Terrible matchup.
No doubt.
I can't add anything to that. I just think that, I hope they don't slip to a 7 or 8 seed.
Right.
But I can kind of see them the way because I know this 5 win and what it took out of this team, it really took a lot out of them. And it's going to be tough. Every game now, no game is a sure thing. It's going to be a bit of a struggle. I can kind of see them falling to that 7th seed, and that's going to be a whole different ball game.
Let me say something, too, about the Pelicans. I mentioned I was blessed to be invited to the funeral, and I was there, and I sat with the Pelicans players. Alvin Gentry and Dell Demps had every player on that team show up for the funeral. This was the morning after the third of those 3 in a row games, and they were all there and exhausted. Everybody knows Anthony Davis was an honorary pallbearer, but the whole team was there, every single guy. And I thought that was special.
Right.
I really do.
Well, especially because, and I mentioned that on the radio show, because you would think that, okay, you played that many games in a short period of time. You got Houston on Saturday. You're probably going home and you're sleeping for the day. But they didn't. They had to get up early and they had to be part of that funeral. So, again, the rest that maybe you thought they would get, no, they weren't on the court, but it wasn't like your body was at rest. And look, I think it showed again. You mentioned it's still showing against Portland. It really showed against Houston on Saturday night.
Yeah, they had nothing in the tank, and they just conceded that one as well. They should have, given the circumstances. Sure. You can point to that one and say, you know, that was going to happen, and it did. Well,
the schedule may fall on Cleveland on Friday night. That's going to be tough at Cleveland, but maybe by the time they get to Golden State, they're sitting some of their players. Oklahoma City on Easter Sunday. You got San Antonio, the last game of the season. You could be playing for a seed there, but in between there, you've got Memphis, Phoenix, and the Clippers. So, you got that West Coast swing before you have to come back to New Orleans to finish that up. It'll be interesting to see, again, how they handle the last 7 games of the season.
You have to beat Memphis and Phoenix.
Absolutely.
I mean, you absolutely have
and
to. I don't care if Phoenix is on the road, you got to do it. Well, the Clippers game's vital because that could be a team that you're competing with to stay in the playoffs,
Mm-hmm.
depending on what happens against Cleveland and what happens against San Antonio. And, it's going to be tough, obviously, because the schedule's not easy the rest of the way. That's why you got to win the two you're supposed to win.
Right. But Davis has played magnificently this year. And even especially with Boogie going out, really has taken the reins of this team.
I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, he certainly deserves MVP, recognition. But the fact is that, to win the games, and Kenny was just saying, but Mirotic has to play well. Rondo has to be back.
Yeah.
If you don't have all your pieces, you're gonna struggle a little bit because Anthony Davis cannot go out every game and the way other teams are guarding him and 36, 38, 40 points and 18 rebounds. I mean, after a while, you need some help, and guys are gonna have to step up. And sometimes as little as hitting free throws towards the end of the game, you got to do what is required.
And look, offensive rebounds, you mentioned they're getting killed there. They have to be a more physical team as they get into the playoffs. You guys know it becomes a half-court game. It becomes more of a grind game. The referees allow you to be much more physical. And there are times when this team is just out-physical.
Well, they don't defend well overall. That's, to me, their deficits this year clearly were turnovers and defense. Turnovers, that's largely not been totally cured, but eliminated to some degree because Boogie Cousins was leading the NBA in turnovers when he went down. So that eliminated that to a degree. But the defensive part of it has not totally been solved. Solomon Hill can defend. He's back now, and they might be getting him back at the right time. He had his best game against Portland, so hopefully that continues. And this on Davis, too. He's having an MVP season. Fantastic season. Unfortunately, there's no chance to get it because James Harden has had an equally fantastic season, if not better, for a team that's off the charts. So he wins it. Although I do think Davis should finish second, with all due apologies to LeBron James, who thinks he should win the thing.
Right, who was playing pretty good ball.
He's played great ball.
No,
but
really
I thought that was pretty interesting when I asked him who's the MVP. He says, I am.
Yeah, well, he's always the MVP.
Good luck with that.
Pels 43-32 as we do this live show today, 5th in the West, and again, 7 games left in the season for the Pelicans. And let's hope that they can make it to the playoffs, which I think they will, but that maybe they can win a series and light a fire under this fan base, huh, guys? I mean, because we are blessed with 2 professional teams in a very small market. And I don't think people realize that. They think of New Orleans, maybe New Orleans of the 60s. We're the New Orleans of the new millennium. And, population, when you look at the type of money that we have here in this town, we got to be all in on these teams to keep them here. Even though, again, we've been told by ownership they'll stay here long term, we got to be all in.
Well, as Mr. Benson said, it's a business, paraphrasing him. And ultimately, in business, you're there to be successful. And if you cannot generate the revenue to be successful, then certainly you have to be concerned.
And I think some were frustrated by maybe some of the crowds. But I tell you what, this crowd against Portland on Tuesday night.
Oh, wow.
That was a playoff type crowd.
Yeah, it was. And it was very, very raucous crowd. And they feel like they have something to cheer for now.
Yeah, of course.
And that's...
And look, we can talk about all the cause and effect of that. The fans may be feeling like that this team has let them down over and over again, but they're in this playoff run. And look, they're over 500. They had a winning season now, and that's something we haven't been able to say for a long time when it comes to basketball here in New Orleans.
And New Orleans appreciates a winner. And this is what the Pelicans have given them now. And you can't fool effort. I mean, when you see guys like Anthony Davis just dragging himself off the ground and going that extra mile. The fans appreciate that, and they know sometimes that'll turn into wins. And Drew Holiday and some of the guys who've just picked it up a little bit, the fans recognize that.
Yeah. Final question for you two guys, Kenny: do they make the playoffs, and do they win a series?
Yes, and maybe.
Depends on who they match.
It really does. I mean, it's all about what position you're in. They're not beating Houston. They're not beating Golden State. They wouldn't beat Utah, but they're not likely to match up with them anyway based upon where things are right now. As I said before, I think they can beat Oklahoma City. I think they can beat San Antonio. I think they can compete well with Portland. I think that would be a 4-3 series. I really do. Yeah. So that's why I'm not waffling at all. I'm just telling you it really does make a difference as to who they would play.
Final word, Renee.
I think they're going to wind up at 7 in the 7th seed. I hope they get to 6. We'll see, but I have a feeling.
Yeah. Renee Nato and also Kenny Trahan of CrestCitySports.com. Join us tonight on the panel. We'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk some Saints. We'll get into some college football spring games that are coming up. Talk about spring practice and, of course, your phone calls. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher.
Burkhardt Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Amco Fence, locally owned and operated since 1976. Fully licensed and insured and a member of the BBB, Amco serves both residential and commercial customers. If you're looking to repair, replace, or install a fence for security or aesthetic reasons, Amco Fence supplies wooden, metal, chain link, vinyl, and ornamental or automatic gates. Amco aims to satisfy your fencing needs. Amco Fence, 504-468-9559 or AmcoFenceCompany.com.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Tonight, Renee Nadeau and Ken Trahan of CrestCitySports.com are our guests. We'll shift to the Saints now. Kenny, let's start with you and your thoughts on first of all, let's talk about what Peyton had to say at the owners' meeting about the must with this team, what he is looking for, and of course it was pass rusher, tight end, wide receiver. Now they signed Ben Watson to a one-year deal yesterday. But as I've said, I don't think that precludes them from going out and getting a tight end in the draft. What are your thoughts about Peyton's must?
I think he's spot on.
Yes.
I think Ben Watson likely does stop them from investing in the first round in a tight end, which doesn't mean they wouldn't do so otherwise if they saw somebody there. Ben Watson is 37. Ben Watson had of course, the Achilles injury that missed the entire 2016 season. But if you look at what he did last year, he had 61 catches. And here's what got my attention. 77.7% of targets were completed to him, the best of his career. That's an extremely high percentage of being targeted. I think it was like 61 for 77, which is remarkable. So to me, that tells me he's still got game. And unlike Kobe Fleener, he will block. Therefore, with this new offense and the approach that they're taking, he really fills both aspects and can be a guy that can play more downs, unlike what they've been doing. Human strictly a blocker, and then you got Hill, who is kind of in between, and you really need a guy that can catch the ball. And he's not a deep guy. He's not going to be a seam guy anymore. He averaged just over 8 yards a catch last year, but he can catch the ball. He understands how to create a little space and catch the football, and he will block. And then, of course, the intangibles are off the charts.
Yes.
As fine a guy as has ever walked into the locker room for the New Orleans Saints. He's that kind of guy. And the effect and the impact he will have on other players, particularly young players, to me is every bit as much. And last but not least, it really does complete the cycle of what the Saints have strived to do the last 3 years, which is to build a locker room full of character and eliminate all of the characters.
Yes. And
they've really done that. And Ben Watson, you look at what's happened in the last week. Ben Watson coming and Ndamukong Suh not coming.
Right. No, I thought it was huge. Honestly, it was, because I didn't think Suh would be a fit here because of the locker room. And I will give a lot of credit to the Saints staff, again, for putting a number out there, staying with that number.
That's it. They didn't take the cheese, budge. Man. They didn't take the cheese. You know, in every case, they stayed out of it.
Same thing.
Jordy Nelson got offered money, so end of story. Jimmy Graham, too much money. No way. He's not worth that at this stage. He's a good player, but he's not that.
Right.
Ndamukong Suh, $14 million. No way.
No way.
I mean, look, he's good. He's a talented player, but there's a lot of trouble in Muhammad Wilkerson, for that matter. Same deal, too much money. So, listen, I really admire that. This is the approach they've taken the last 3 years. It's so easy to say, oh, he's there, I got to get that guy. Right. And then you do it, and then you look back and say, I have no money to spend, and this guy's not all he was cranked up to be. So they've done a good job. Draft well again, and I like the guys that they've signed, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in a second. Kenny, why don't you, first of all, take the must, and then I would like you to answer those questions as well. Ben Watson and Suh.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this first of all. You look back at this time last year, on the guys who made a splash on offense and defense, okay? And a free agency, Larry Warford and
A.J. Klein?
Ted Ginn, okay? Ted Ginn on offense, okay? They drafted Kamara and they drafted Ramczyk. All four of those guys on offense had a splash. Defensively, Okafor came in and was doing very, very well. Rankins even did well last year, and I call it his second rookie year because he got hurt in his rookie year, and he missed 8 games, and once he came back, it was never the same. So Rankins really last year was his first year. Then you signed Klein, Anzalone was a draft choice. Teo was a great addition.
Yes, he was.
And then Marshawn Lattimore and Marcus Williams were draft choices. And Crawley, I'll throw him in there because he played in 5 games in 2016. So he was a guy who was a new addition. So you got all these guys on offense and defense. They don't need as much in 2017 because of the way those guys perform. It certainly had an impact on the record. I mean, after 3-7-9 records, and all of a sudden, you know, they were where they were last year. You don't need as much. You do need some support. And 2 areas on offense they're hurting. Not only tight end, they seriously need an inside guy, a tackle or a guard for sure. Bushrod is going to be an addition, but you know, and they signed a Theus kid from Carolina. Neither of those guys are going to have a tremendous impact. They need somebody to come in either as draft choice and help out, like a Ramczyk. That's going to be a lot to ask for. You also need a wide receiver. That you don't have a third wide receiver. And again, you hope he has the performance he did in 2017. You don't know that. They were hoping to sign a running back as a third guy. You don't have that third guy right now. So there's a lot of areas. In depth, you can almost go across the board in every position. So you don't really have to focus on this spot or this spot. Depth everywhere, and look at how the depth last year got them out of where they were. You don't have Ramczyk, you got a problem, and Teo when he came in. And so guys who you thought were going to be support guys wound up starting and being having tremendous years.
And I like the way that they've approached this. I mean, again, they have a price they put on a player, and they won't go above that. But also using free agency to fill holes, and then having the flexibility in the draft to go after the best player available, regardless of position, especially early in the draft.
Yeah, and the thing is, I wouldn't be surprised to see him go after wide receiver. I'd be very, very surprised to see him go after tight end, maybe unless they maybe pick up a second or third round and pick an extra one.
Yes.
They need an alignment. I wouldn't be shocked to see him pick up a defensive back, a cornerback. I wouldn't be surprised because remember a couple of years ago with all the injuries and everything, and they need a rusher. That's you know, you want to get a rusher, but there's so many other spots, and if there's somebody rated a little higher, you don't want to go aim on just a position only. You want to go for the best player available. And the first pick, I wouldn't say would surprise people, but it may not be the person that you think they're going to go after.
Talk about Sue and not signing Sue.
I agree with what Kenny said. $14 million is a lot of money, and he's one or two flags, penalties away from making a difference in a game for the wrong reasons. And I think that's a fear I had. If he would have had a personal foul penalty and all of a sudden cost the Saints dearly, and it could cost them a game, it's something like that I was afraid of. But the $14 million, man, that's way too high for a player. You know, if the price would have been lower, you know, $7-8 million maybe. But I think they did better sticking to their guns and not signing.
Any concerns about him in the locker room with this very young and impressionable locker room? Because again, this is not the locker room of the Saints winning the Super Bowl. This is a young team that again is still learning how to be NFL players.
You got a lot of young guys on Yamada, and you got Rankins, and you know, you got some young guys there. Cam Jordan is the sheriff there, so you know he's going to kind of watch things. But you know, Sean Payton has done a really good job signing players that have had a checkered past, but once they fit in, you know, they fit in well.
Nick Fairley.
Yeah. And so you have to have the right mix of guys that you can roll a dice on, and once they get here, they blend in well with the guys you have. But you have to have a strong locker room, like a guy like Cam Jordan, for example. Man, that certainly makes a difference.
Interesting what Los Angeles has done in bringing in Sue, because you know, you got Aaron Donald next to him, who's in his 5th-year option. And as I mentioned on the radio show, I guess the bidding starts at $15-16 million for Donald now, who's the most dominant player in the NFL. And now you're going to put Sue next to him. Obviously, it's going to help Sue. It's going to help Donald having those two guys as a tandem. Of course, don't forget about Michael Brockers also in that rotation. But again, looking forward, you know, I understand he's probably a 1-year NFL mercenary, talking about Sue, but you know, Donald's going to get paid.
Well, the Rams are a genuine contender, largely because of the moves they've made to leave as well.
Yeah,
and they're going for it. They're going for it now, and Peters. And when you look at where the Saints are and what they were trying to do. Renee mentioned Rankins. The reason that they were interested in Wilkerson and interested in Sue was to try to find a guy to put next to Rankins to take double teams off of him, because he's not a very big guy.
Yes.
You know, he's about 6 foot. He's legitimately about 295, 300. And his asset is his first step and his quickness. And, you know, when he gets double teams, obviously that's going to make him not as effective. Then it's incumbent upon the Davisons or the Onyematas to step up and play. And they're solid guys, but they're not that guy per se. So when you talk about needs, Sean Payton was spot on. They need a wide receiver very badly, and everybody knows that.
Yes.
And, of course, the rush end certainly remains a priority for them, even though they're bringing Okafor back, character guy, and he's coming off of a significant injury. So they understand that. These are guys they need. Anzalone is a speed guy, but you don't know about his shoulder long term.
Right.
Craig Robertson was a nice insurance policy who plays well in the box, not as good in space, but a solid guy to have on your team. They still have some needs. I think Peyton was right on. Watson plugs a hole for now. Short-term thing, but still a guy that is going to help your team and make you better. And I like the other moves they've made, by the way. And with regard to their offensive line, they feel Bushrod has gas in the tank, and they think he can play inside if he needs to as well. So they think they got their guy. That was Calamete previously.
Right.
If that's true, they don't need any help on the offensive line. If it's not true, they need help.
Right. Your thoughts on Demario Davis?
Wow, he's going to be a big help in that linebacking core, and you know, and they're pretty solid with what they have, but he upgrades that position. He's a volume tackler. He's an excitable guy. He's a great character guy in the locker room. He fits this defense exceptionally well. He dropped very well. He's a big time hitter, and he's a guy.
Short tackler too.
Oh, he's a short tackler, and he's a guy that makes a difference. He's a guy that can change with big tackles and big time plays, forcing fumbles. He can change the complexion of a game by his play, and he lifts that defense because he's an excitable kind of guy. Again, he makes a lot of tackles, and guys want to follow him because you know he plays well, and he's a great example for other players, young players.
What can you add, Kenny?
Well, I think he makes them more athletic at linebacker. This is a position where they weren't very athletic for really a period of 3 or 4 years. Anzalone with his speed, Te'o, who's a swing guy that has speed, and now you have a guy in Davis who can run. He can play side to side, and he's a striker at the point of attack.
Yes.
He can play inside right next to A.J. Klein, which I think is the most likely scenario, with Te'o possibly playing outside when he's called upon to play. Anzalone and Robertson are certainly there. So I think it gives them some flexibility, but more than anything else, it makes them more athletic at a position where they really needed to be more athletic.
Talk about the Saints being reunited with Patrick Robinson.
Man, that was a great ad, and he is so much better on the field and confidence-wise since he left here. He's coming off a Super Bowl. He was a big part of that Philadelphia Eagle defense, and man, he's going to fill a role as a slot guy. It's really going to upgrade that defensive secondary. You know, with Lattimore coming off an outstanding year and Crawley getting better, you know, you do need another cornerback, and Patrick Robinson is certainly a guy who's coming back in a leadership role now. You know, he's got that Super Bowl ring. That's going to attract a lot of attention. But he's coming back to a place that drafted him #1, and he feels very, very comfortable here with the coaching staff. I think it's a great fit.
Right. And he's found his niche now at nickel, right?
Well, I think he's in a perfect spot now. And I think when the Saints had him initially, first of all, there was a lot of pressure. He was a top pick. Secondly, they had him on an island outside, and that's not where he excels.
Agreed.
And even though he's 30, 31 years old, he still runs really well. That's his biggest asset. Playing inside in the slot, he can absolutely cover those guys and really gives them that guy that they didn't have last year. Vaccaro could do that a little bit when healthy, but he wasn't real good in space, which is why they didn't make the investment in him. But I think the bigger story here is who does what the Saints have done. I wrote a piece at CrescentCitySports.com about reunited, and it feels so good.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3 guys that they've brought back this year that used to play for this team. Who does that? And prior to that, they brought back 5 others in the previous 2 years who had played for this team. The Raphael Bushes and the Chase Daniels and the Jonathan Goodwins and the Jari Evans, and I'm missing one other. But, I mean, who brings back that many guys that used to play for you? You have to leave without severing ties, burning bridges, and getting along with people. And the other part of Robinson that we need to remember is Dennis Allen was the secondary coach here when the Saints drafted him. He liked him. And I think that was part of the attraction for Robinson coming back here.
Is that about culture, though, Kenny, when you bring back guys that have been here previously, that know what's expected of them, know the Peyton way, and you have such a young team to bring guys in that have been through this before?
By the way, the other was Roman Harper, of course. But yeah, the answer is yes. They understand what it's all about. The coaches understand who they are. And as I said before, they wouldn't bring them back if they didn't like the character of the individuals. And I think that's a big part of this. I think what Renee said is right. They've really changed the way they've approached things. And you got to have football players. You can have the nicest guys in the world, but if they don't win, they're not good enough. It won't matter. You got to have guys who can play football. But they're bringing back guys in their mind who can play, who certainly have good character too. So it's a good mix. They're not there yet, but they're close. And the reason they're not there yet is because they're in a conference that's brutal. I mean, the Eagles are lights out. They're not going anywhere. The Rams are really good. The Vikings got a quarterback now who's really good. And the Falcons, you hate to hear it, they're still good.
Yes.
Carolina is still good. Green Bay's got Rodgers back. Where do you want me to stop? I mean, Detroit's not bad. I mean, this is a good conference, much better than the AFC.
No doubt. We almost forget about Kurt Coleman because he was signed so early.
Sure.
I mean, talk about Coleman because he's going to bring a lot to the table.
He did, and he was an interception kind of guy, and he was a guy that played very well at Carolina. The Saints were very familiar with him, facing him twice a year. And I think the trade-off with Carroll leaving and Coleman coming in, I think it's going to be that great.
Yeah.
Well, Coleman was hurt last year.
Yes.
He was not the same guy.
True.
And the Saints are banking on the fact that he's the guy that you saw 2 years ago, not the guy you saw last year. And if he's healthy, they feel like he will be. That remains to be seen. If he is, it's an outstanding move.
Right.
I like him, and I think what Renee said also is accurate here. When you have a chance to see a guy as much as the Saints saw him, it gives you a pretty good evaluation, much like they got with Ted Ginn.
Right, true. And you're taking a player from another team.
From a team in your division.
Which is always good. And you talk about being familiar with a player, signing Tom Savage as a backup quarterback after seeing him for years in practice against Houston and playing him in the preseason as well. What can they expect from Tom Savage?
Well, that's an interesting question. The guy started games in the league. His numbers aren't good. He's had one more pick than TDs in his limited time. Wasn't all that impressive when he had the chance. Wasn't surrounded by great talent in that situation. The thing that bothers me about him is that last year he had 8 fumbles. 8 fumbles. And he didn't play anywhere near a full season.
Sure.
Ball security is first and foremost. You talk about picks, and you can't throw too many of those, but you can't fumble the ball 8 times. I think he's a stopgap. I don't think he's the guy moving forward. I think they want to take a really good look at Taysom Hill in the preseason and see what they've got.
Right.
If you go back and look at BYU, he's an interesting guy. He was always hurt.
Yes.
He's a guy with size, with speed, and a good arm.
Which is why
but he's never been able to play, and then he served the Mormon mission.
Yes.
So what do you have? They're not really sure.
Right.
So now's the time to find out. How do you do that? Play him in the preseason.
And not just that. I mean, you think about putting him on kickoff and punts. The guy was often injured in college, and you're exposing him. Maybe your backup quarterback. Your thoughts on Tom Savage?
I don't think the backup quarterback is on the team right now.
Right.
Savage, and I wrote about this in Crescent City Sports. He signed with Rutgers. He was a highly recruited kid. He went to Arizona. Rich Rodriguez was there. He jumped ship. And he went to Pittsburgh. So he was at 3 colleges. He didn't have any success in the pros. Big guy, about 6'4", 235. Taysom Hill, I don't know if I had my quarterback running down covering kicks. I just think that they're going to sign a veteran somewhere. I don't know who, but I think as the cuts come up, they're going to pick up somebody and during camp. I don't think the backup quarterback, when they start the season, the real backup quarterback is on the roster.
Well, guys, it leads me to my next question before we go to the phone lines, because again, it is something that everyone's talking about, the heir apparent to Drew Brees. And Peyton mentioned it this week that he's not looking for a Drew Brees clone because that guy's not out there. But I've talked about on the radio show, you still have to have the attributes that make a quarterback special in this offense, which again is high football IQ and accuracy. You can live with the athleticism. You can live with the size. I mean, because everybody now talking, about Lamar Jackson, maybe some other players that may fall. At the end of the day, you still got to be accurate, and you got to have high football IQ to make it in this offense. Do they go after a quarterback in this draft, or is it next year's draft?
I think it's more likely next year. You never rule it out if that one guy happens to be in that spot. Interesting comments about Jackson. He's a really good athlete, but he's not that accurate. And to me, that's not something you learn or get better at.
Right.
Deshaun Watson, off the charts. Fantastic guy individually, fantastic leader, good athlete, but an accurate thrower.
Yes.
And I think he's poised to be a great player in this league.
Cam Newton.
And Marcus Mariota was a kind of guy like that too.
Yes.
But Lamar Jackson, great athlete. I just don't see it from an accuracy perspective. So as a result, is there a guy out there we don't know about that they're not talking about? Maybe. They tried it with Garrett Grayson. It didn't happen, obviously. So I'm thinking more in terms of next year. Now, things could happen. They could trade up, trade down, and now they get an extra pick or two, and maybe there's a guy there. But the way the quarterback roulette wheel is spinning right now in the first round, those guys are all going to be gone.
Yes.
And they're going to be gone pretty early, including Mayfield.
I agree. I definitely. And all that talk about Mayfield, he's maybe a top 6 pick.
He would. I would say just keep an eye on, maybe second or third round. If they fall in love with him, Luke Falk from Washington State.
Okay.
He's a guy to keep an eye on.
Do you think there's a chance they'll go after a quarterback this year?
Maybe third round. If
third
they
round.
think he's worth it, and you say third round for your starter, I don't know. Luke Falk is a guy I think is a name to keep an eye on.
Okay, we definitely will. Let's head to the phone lines. 866-3200. Jeffrey is on the West Bank. Jeffrey, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Jeffrey.
Hey, how you doing? Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to know if you guys think that Dale Dempsey and Alvin Gentry deserve an apology from you guys. Y'all, it's kind of hard on those guys the past 2 years, and saying this is the year they have to prove something. You think those guys deserve some type of apology?
I think they're both going to return. Thank you for the phone call. I think that they've done what they need to do to again hold on to their jobs. I'm not sure what the new contracts are going to be there for them, but I definitely think that they've earned the right to return.
Speaking from my perspective, I don't know an apology to Alvin Gentry at all. I've never questioned him at all. I've always said he deserves the opportunity to show what he can do. My question was always about Dell Demps, and I think 6 years is plenty of time to produce, and it didn't happen. That said, he got the opportunity, and now he's done a good job of putting together a roster that's been not only competitive but winning. So he does deserve the opportunity to continue on, in my mind. Apology? No, we just call it like we see it, Jeffrey. Bottom line was, over a 6-year period, were you pleased with the roster? Were you pleased with the wins and losses? It's not a matter of whether or not you like a guy or dislike a guy, and I like him. By the way, he's a good guy, and he's got a really good family. And I'm happy he's winning now, too. But an apology, no. You just call it like you see it, and we call it now the way we're seeing it, which is they deserve to be back. They've earned it.
Past mistake in Dell Dempsey's part cost him a number 1 draft choice. To get rid of Osik, you had to give away your number 1 draft choice, and I know number 1 draft choices in basketball are not like the NFL, but still, I think he admitted that Osik had to go. It cost you a number 1 draft choice.
Yeah. Well, there's some warts there over the last 6 years. There's no doubt about it. Some bad luck, too. But, again, I thought he deserved the criticism he's gotten from myself and others in our industry. And, again, it's a bottom-line business. You got to win professional sports.
Yeah, and Gentry's playing with the team he's been given.
Right.
So how you could criticize him in that fashion, I don't know. You could say, well, he's never won anything. Well, that also has to do with the teams you've had. He only had 1 chance to win. That was in Phoenix when Steve Nash was still Steve Nash, and they got upset and beat. So that's really it. But he's a fine guy. He was a good assistant here with the Hornets initially, and he's a good guy now. He's doing a really fine job. Do players buy in? Do they respond to you? And it's pretty obvious that they're responding to him.
There's no doubt they've responded, and they like the type of style they're playing now as well, which again, is a fun look. If you're playing basketball and you're playing that style, it's a fun style, especially because everybody's touching the basketball and everybody has an opportunity to be successful on the court. Let's shift gears for a moment. Let's talk a little bit about, we're in the middle of spring football right now. LSU getting ready to have their spring game. Renee, why don't you take this first? Talk a little bit about what we can expect out of the Tigers, a real turnover for this team now, and some unknowns on what we're going to see on offense. Defense looks like it's going to be pretty steady, but you got, again, some depth issues in the defensive backfield. Give us your synopsis.
And I want to say this, and Kenny knows, I just did a story on going around a spring tour in the SEC. Some of the opponents LSU's going to be playing on CrescentCitySports.com, and you might want to check it out. Right now, this is regardless of what you hear, this offense is made for Miles Brennan, and it's given him every opportunity to win the job. This is not to have Justin McMillan may compete there, but this is not an offense where you're going to change and have a guy come in on a package and do some things differently and stuff. It's designed to have a lot of wideouts, to have the receivers, running backs as receivers. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a guy I think you're going to see in a lot of ways next year. They're saying about Brissett may be the starter. I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to wind up being a guy in the backfield who's going to be a really good receiver and play a number of roles. You're going to see a lot of full wide receiver sets. Tight end, I think Foster Morrow is excited as heck because he's going to catch a lot of passes now. The defense is, they got some athletes there now, and Fiocco is a guy that is really going to make a big splash at defensive tackle for them. And Jonathan Giles on offense. He's a guy, he was a semifinalist for the Blitnikoff Award 2 years ago. Yes. So I think that's going to be big. Cornerback situation is something they have to address. I think they're going to be okay there when the dust settles. I think the cornerback position will be okay, barring any injuries. Their defense, this team could be a lot better than people think. I know the schedule is daunting, but this team it could be better than people think. And there's a lot of unknowns right now, especially with your quarterback. But I think this could be a better team than people anticipate.
Kenny, what can you add?
Well, I think it's Miles Brennan's job. I think that what they've done is keep the others engaged, and they don't want to see a guy transfer.
They can't afford
I mean, that's
it.
really what it's all about at this stage. And that's not to talk down Lowell Narcisse or Justin McMillan, both of whom have shown some good things. Narcisse is a big guy, and he's got some skill. But with this particular offense, it really is more suited to Miles Brennan. If you were talking about the offense that was here previously, under Les Miles, there's no question that Narcisse could have played in that offense and would have fit it based upon what they were trying to do. And in the case of McMillan, I think he's probably the backup guy no matter what. Brennan has to be that guy. He can make the throws. He fits this offense. It's something he's done. I think it's definitely slanted to him. From the standpoint of throwing the ball, they'll have the weapons. The kid from Texas Tech can flat out play. You know, Racey McMahon's stepping up a little bit. They're pretty happy with his progress. But, of course, they're waiting on Terrace Marshall to get totally healthy and Jamar Chase to come in. Yes. And now they've got themselves something that is really enabling them to change the offense and make them more of a passing team. Combine that with the fact that they've had the elite of the elite running backs for how long now?
Yeah.
And they don't have that now.
Right.
With all due respect to Nick Brissett and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, they're average guys, and they're not going to be any more than that, in my opinion. That doesn't mean they're bad. They're just not Leonard Fournette, and they're not Darius guys.
But I think the offensive line could be a strength this year. The coach, they're really happy with the progression of the offensive line. They got a new offensive line coach in here, and he's done a good job. And they got some capable players on the offensive line. Yeah. I think they'd be okay.
Looking forward to it. It's almost football all year round down here in New Orleans.
Well, here's what I like about it. One more thing I know you. What I like about what they're doing is, you want to beat Alabama. You're not going to beat Alabama lining up and trying to beat them physically. They've tried that forever, and it isn't going to happen. So the way to beat them is to have speed on the exterior, have speed on the outside, get to the edges. That's how people beat them, and have a quarterback that can make plays. Miles Brennan is not a great athlete, but he's not a bad athlete either. So they don't have that guy that can run away from people like Deshaun Watson, who does. But at the same time, they have other players now that are in other positions that might be able to create space and create some mismatches, which they haven't been able to do.
Good deal. Renee Nato, Kenny Trahan, CrestCitySports.com. It is a must if you love sports here in New Orleans. You got to put that on your favorites. Make it your home page. Thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Great to have you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there is a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night right here on WLAE-TV at 10 p.m. Also, Pelican Sports Television, 9 o'clock every Friday night. Catch me on the radio weekdays, noon to 2 at Sports 1280, 101.1 FM HD2. The iHeartRadio app is a free download for your smartphone or tablet. Download that for me if you would. Also, you can check us out at sports1280.com, where you can listen live, download the podcast, or ericasher.com. Listen live, download the podcast there. Also, all the previous episodes of Inside New Orleans Sports can be seen at ericasher.com as well. Special thanks to our guests tonight, Renee Nato and Ken Trahan. Also to the WLE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Kenny Juno back in the booth tonight. Also William Hill and Naila Jones. Thanks so much for watching. Now we're going to go live and direct to the St. Louis Cathedral for Holy Thursday Mass.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbysrestaurant.com.